Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Ty, and I will be your moderator for today's 60-minute program. This webinar, Boosting AP Efficiency in a Remote Workforce, is being presented by CFO Daily News and sponsored by Chipotle. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat box in the control panel. If they're regarding the subject being presented, I'll add them to the queue for questions at the end. Now I'd like to introduce your speaker, Pamela Fagan-Scholl.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be with you today. We're going to be talking quite a bit about accounts payable and some of the main issues. And before we get going too far, I just want to get everyone's attention as to what exactly accounts payable is. What's the job description of people who work in accounts payable, whether they are a clerk, a manager, what is an accounts payable professional's job? Well, according to all the things that are out there that I've read and that I've dealt with over the last, well, believe it or not, I've been accounts payable for 50 years. So over the last 50 years, it's a major issue. Protect the bottom line, protect the company's assets. Now, many of you are saying, well, I'm just a clerk. How can I do that? Well, it all has to do with your processes. There are three main controls that are involved in accounts payable. Number one, receive only the goods and services ordered. Now, we may not be the ones actually ordering them, but we want to make sure that whatever we do receive, that they have been ordered by the appropriate people. Then, of course, the second control, pay only for goods and services actually received. And you would not believe how many companies miss the boat in this area because they don't have good controls in place. And then, of course, the most important one is to prevent fraud. You know, whenever I teach an accounts payable class, I always tell people that, you know, we want to receive only the goods and services ordered, pay only for the goods and services received, and then I say we want to commit fraud. Well, people always ask always laugh when I say that. And the reason why is because in order to prevent it, you need to know what to watch for. And you'd be surprised what people will do in order to commit fraud. So our job is to prevent that. And the way we do that is with all of the controls that we put in place in accounts payable. Now, the real question then is, what is the secret to an efficient accounts payable department? Well, an article that I read basically said that the benefits that accrue from a properly implemented process automation project are many and range from faster delivery, more efficient use of resources, lower overall costs, improved cash flows, and improved customers and supplier satisfaction levels. Now, this all goes to everything that we just talked about. A few years ago, most organizations were very unsure if the automating business process was really worth it, worth the time and the investment. Well, fast forward to today. The reality is that automatic processes and workflows have become an essential component in supporting operational efficiency and, of course, business growth. The benefits that accrue from this properly implemented process automation project are many and range from faster delivery, more efficient use of resources, as we already mentioned, okay? And of course, the improved cash flow, the overall cost, everything that this slide is telling you. There now seems to be little doubt that many organizations have much to gain from examining what their processes are, identifying and defining those that are suboptimal, as is a good word to use, and then putting in place business processes that automate and deliver a more efficient and effective operation. Automation is the key to helping to streamline processes to improve the accuracy and efficiency of any organization's financial operations and ensure that bills are paid on time and that any associated documentation is well organized. Receive only the services and goods ordered, pay only for those received, and of course, prevent fraud. So the secret of top performing companies today is to go to automation. So in today's agenda, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how these processes can actually help your company. So we'll go into four major parts. First, the automated process itself, how it's supposed to work. And of course, you'll see that I've got these little bullet points where it talks about saving time, being efficient and effective, eliminating paper, expediting the approval process, and of course, organizing efficient month-end and year-end closing. So we'll go a little bit into how the automated process can help you in that area, okay? Then, of course, we'll get into the next part, benefits of going to an automated process. Streamlining the process, I'm going to share with you an example of what I mean by that. Increase collaboration between employees and departments. And of course, at the same time, you also want to deal with your vendors in such a way that you increase the collaboration there, and of course, increase visibility and control, so everyone knows, you know, what's on the horizon. How are we watching for and preventing fraud as much as possible? Which of course gets to the third section, security of an automated process, fraud detection, and heaven forbid, especially in today's world, stop these hackers that are going through. As you know, we just heard last night, we have major hackers going on in our federal government. So basically the key is we've got to realize that the more and more we do go to these online systems, the more preventive we have to be in setting up our systems in such a way to prevent these problems, okay? But there is one more area in boosting the efficiency of our accounts payable process, and that is the guide to performance reviews of remote workers to ensure that efficiency actually happens. So we'll be going into all of these areas throughout the day or throughout the webinar today and figuring out what it's all about. So let's start with the very first section, the automated process, how it should actually work. Okay, actually reading from the slide for just a moment. Whilst there are many processes that might benefit from re-engineering and automation, few stand out as much as those in accounts payable department. The nature of invoice processing and management lends itself perfectly to more automated and systematic approach to manage the following segments. And we will go into some of these. Document recognition and intelligent extraction, transforming of unstructured data to structured formats, the capture of data to one or more systems, and the initiation of processes dependent on sets of business rules and other subsequent financial processes. Okay, in order to go into the why, we have to ask ourselves many questions. And the most important ones that you have to ask right at the beginning is, how long does it take for my organization to receive an invoice? It's very important that you track this time frame. What you want to do is take a look at your process now and compare it to what it can be to become more efficient, okay? And of course, we have to look at how many staff members are involved in the entire accounts payable process. Now, remember, it's not just the accounts payable department. When you talk about the entire process, you're talking about purchasing, sales, we're talking about contracts, we're talking about many people involved, managers, stakeholders, and of course at the end, you've got the people that are looking at the actual financials. They want to know that the information you've put in is reliable, okay? But you also need to actually outline how many steps does it take to process one invoice. Now, it's very important that you do this. And the reason why, okay, I worked with a company many years ago. They were actually doing everything, by hand for the longest time. They were thinking about going to an automated process. So what they did was they hired someone, and this was before we had all these wonderful softwares that are out there now. They hired this person to come in and do what they called a homegrown system. Well, I got to tell you, that homegrown system was worse than the hands-on manual process that they had, because they went from just a few steps to process an invoice through all the approvals and everything else and all the people involved, which was quite a few actually, to, believe it or not, an automated process that they wrote that had 68 steps to it just to process one invoice. Can you imagine how long that took? Okay, and how many people had to be involved? And they were basically having duplicate steps all over the place. So they brought me in to find a way to be more efficient. So what I did was I looked at this process and I outlined every single step. I eliminated all the duplicate steps as much as I possibly could, got it way down to about 20 steps or so. And then what I did is I went out and I found an accounts payable software for them that would work. Now, this was many years ago, so it wasn't as efficient as the ones we have now. But the question you've got to ask yourself is, how many steps does it take to process one invoice? And you're going to hear me say this several times today. How much do you get paid per minute? How many minutes does it take you to do something? That is the cost per transaction. So when you talk about steps, you're talking about transactions. How much does it cost to do all of this? And you'd be surprised how much you can save by automating and going to a much better system, okay? But you also have your vendors that you have to think about. Do we have vendors who request or require us to pay electronically? Because more and more companies are going that route. You've got to understand that they want things done quickly and in a more timely fashion. And in the long run, it actually gets them paid quicker in most cases than a typical old-fashioned manual or partially manual, partially automated system works. So basically, they want to find a way to make it work better, okay? And they want us to work with them on that. And then how much do our staff members get paid per minute, as I mentioned? How many minutes does it take to process one invoice and one payment? And heaven forbid, there are multiple steps in that invoice process, okay? So what are we looking at? We want to save time, be more efficient and more effective. How do we go about doing that? Well, automation can easily eliminate repetitive time-consuming tasks like opening and sorting invoices, manual data entry, inter-office mail and overnight deliveries, and so on. We want to reduce our invoice approval time if we possibly can. The worst thing that can happen in a manual system is it usually, believe it or not, takes about 28 days to process an invoice from the time it comes in, get it approved, and actually get it done. And if you go from 28 days to an automated system, you might be actually looking at 2.7 or 2.8 days, okay? And so what about lost or misplaced invoices, scanning files, things like that? Many organizations are still reliant on the old-fashioned traditional invoice processing, which often is made up of a set of largely manual processes. They can be very slow, unreliable, be very costly, and, well, prone to human error, not to mention fraud. Invoices come in, and think about the process for a minute. They've got to be received, date stamped, checked by accounts payable, get it recorded on your financial software, approved by someone in authority, match, cross-referenced, transferred to the payment system, stored for future reference. It's a very cumbersome procedure. So that's high staff costs, has considerable potential for delays and errors. If or when it goes wrong and invoices go in unpaid, it can damage your reputation with your vendors and other people. So it results in late payments and so on. So the process has become increasingly complex over the years. And as invoices are received through a multitude of different platforms, think about it for just a moment. If you're still manual and your vendors have gone automated, this slows everything up. And so we've got hard copy, electronic formats, we've got the snail mail, you have email, you have EDI, you have faxing. This mass majority are semi-structured and have to be entered manually. And so it takes a lot of problems, a lot of errors, duplications, all kinds of mistakes, not to mention opening the door for all kinds of fraud. So this process, we want to make it more efficient, save time. And what we've told people for years is that you've got to get into the habit of touch a piece of paper, if you indeed do have a piece of paper, once and be done with it. Well, the same concept goes to automation. We want to only touch that invoice one time. Same thing with whoever's doing the approval, one time, and be done with it if we possibly can. This is why when they first came out with automated systems, a lot of companies went to an ERS system in order, an evaluated receipt system, in order to make sure everything was done once. It's the old three-way match down to what they call a one-way match, okay? Old-fashioned, I know, but the idea is you've got to go back to the basics to figure out. So if you automate your process, here's what's going to happen. Number one, you'll know when those invoices come in. You'll be flagged. You'll know immediately what's out there, and you'll know which balances are still outstanding and what, do we have to look into it, see if there's a problem with it? If so, how do I contact the vendor to make sure that we understand what's happening? You'll know exactly when your payments are due because basically they'll be flagged in the system and let you know, oh, today is the day you're supposed to be paying this one, or you have to pay it in the next check run or whatever. And I say check, I'm using that, I guess you might say, as an example, because I know many of you have gone to ACH rather than actual checks, but some of you still do some kinds of checks. Who knows, okay? You also can track who hasn't done their job by approving the invoices and payments. We can speed up the process a little bit by understanding that people outside accounts payable need to be trained to expedite what's happening and stay on top of it. And so basically you'll be able to tell right away with your any type of automated system who hasn't done their job to approve those invoices or payments or whatever. It's also going to be very easy in the case of a vendor asking questions or any kind of auditors asking any kind of questions, okay? It's going to be easy to search, retrieve the invoice and payment information. If any of you have ever gone through a sales and use tax audit or an IRS audit or even an outside agency audit, such as your CPA firm or something like that, you know they are going to ask to see a lot of your documentation. And the worst thing is try to go through the old paper files, trying to pull everything out and then trying to get it all put back again, and errors happen. Next thing you know, you can't find things. It's not filed correctly. With an automated system, it's right there at your fingertips. And that is the key to all of that, okay? Also, we want to easily maintain our master vendor file. What we're saying there is analyze, manage accounts payable spending, and renegotiate with vendors where you can. The more you have in your master vendor file regarding your vendor, the easier it is to negotiate with them things about how they want to be paid and what the payment terms should be and what they can expect from your company and so on. Plus, let's face it, the one thing that we don't want to deal with, if we can help it, is problems with independent contractors and their 1099s that lead to things like B notices and everything else. All of these types of problems create time that is wasted. We want to be more efficient. If I have an independent contractor, the first thing I'm going to do is tell them, hey, until I get your 1099, you will not be paid. And I can mark it in my automated system whether or not they have actually given me that 1099 information and attach it to their part of the file. But the master vendor file also needs to be monitored and updated as necessary on a regular basis. And you'd be surprised how many people forget to, I guess you might say, clean out their master vendor file on a regular basis. Most companies, if they haven't done business with a vendor for at least 2 years, they'll try to eliminate them from the automatic process. Or if they've only done business with them one time in a 12-month period, they may take them out of their system. So going through your master vendor file is very important. But I also want to point out the person who handles the master vendor file should not be the person who actually processes invoices. Once again, we have an internal control issue. We want to prevent fraud. And basically, this is where your approval process comes into play and that sort of thing, okay? So we want to make sure we have all these things in place. All right, now, the cost factors. How are we going to save money? All right, well, eliminate paper. If we go to a cloud-based system, okay, a lot of people, basically when it comes to a cloud-based system, system, they're not sure they trust it. And more companies are realizing that you can trust it. It's just that you've got to make sure that your system is set up very, very well and secure, which we are going to talk about a little bit later, how to get that security in place, make sure we're okay with all of it and everything else. And then processing paper checks and paper invoices are very costly. It says here that the average cost for a paper check is $10. Well, believe it or not, that's not quite true. It actually is higher than that. By the time you also include all the labor involved, the people involved in trying to process that check, processing the invoice that goes with it at $22 just to process the invoice, you're really looking, believe it or not, the banks will tell you and experts will tell you it actually costs an average, believe it or not, about $75 to process a paper check. So one thing we don't want to do is any manual checks if we can help it. In other words, what we're saying is if we can keep everything as automated as possible, we will reduce those costs. Now, people say to me, well, where are you coming up with that $75? Keep in mind that when you're dealing with paper checks and things like that, it actually, there's the cost factor of storage, there's cost factor of the check itself to process it, there's the cost factor of the snail mail, there's the cost factor of processing the invoice from beginning to end, the approval process. I mean, there's a lot to it. You can eliminate much of that or reduce that cost substantially with an automated system, okay? Most importantly, in today's world, mobility. Let's face it, we've got this new normal, which I'm getting to the point where I hate that word. But I was doing a webinar not too long ago where I mentioned that is the new normal our actual normal, or can we get back to some of what we were doing in the previous year ago? The thing is, a lot of companies have realized that having their non-essential, which I hate calling accounts payable non-essential because without accounts payable, our companies could not survive, but non-essential personnel working anywhere from home especially. And this really does lead to the possibility of less staff is needed. We can work different hours. We can be more flexible, but it also creates other problems, which we'll talk about later. But the cost factor is if they can work anywhere, okay, and there's less staff needed because it's a quicker process, then maybe I could use those persons elsewhere. Remember I told you about eliminating many steps with that company several years ago. It was interesting because it turned out that by the time we got done, we only needed 1.5 people. Now they had a 3-person accounts payable department. We got down to 1.5. And people say, well, then that means that someone lost their job and someone had to go part-time. No, we found someplace else in the company to use them more effectively. One of the things that the person that was working half or part-time, we put her also in charge of working with sales and use tax because it was a company that was in all 50 states, and the sales and use tax process was a nightmare. And so we moved her over to there and had the other person help her make sure it was all up to date. And then we moved that other person to another area. So we were able to effectively use our staff in other ways that actually saved the company money. And I've never really thought of accounts payable as a revenue generating department, but you go to a automated process and you'd be surprised how accounts payable becomes almost revenue, not just a cost center, okay? Research, basically a lot of people took a lot of times, hours, trying to find things. Well, with the internet, it takes seconds instead of minutes or hours to find a lot of things. And researching an invoice is at your fingertips because a lot of times you can find things immediately the minute you bring it up in your automated system. So between the research of invoices, or research to see, what's going on in a company or something like that, a lot quicker and all that sort of thing, okay? So basically, so far, the automated process can save us money, can make things a lot quicker, a lot more efficient, and so on. But what are the other benefits of an automated process? All right, well, the main thing here is to I guess you might say, look at the efficiency gains. Okay, what do we gain by going to an automated process? All right, take a look at the first bullet point. Benefits their organization's accounts payable system. Save time and money by eliminating those repetitive, time-consuming tests. How much do you get paid per minute? How many minutes it take you to do something? Increase productivity even as volume increases without adding additional personnel. I've got a company right now that I've been working with, and the other day we had a meeting, and one of the board of directors was on, and they were amazed because they thought that, without, I guess they hadn't really looked at everything as far as the financials and that sort of thing. They didn't realize that the entire company, multi-million-dollar company, was being run by 6 people. That's it, 6 people. And the thing about it is it was a service industry, so nonprofit. And so basically the increase in productivity, because they had gone totally remote, the volume increased of what they were able to produce without adding more people. Okay. And so they don't need to grow yet in staff members. Now down the road, as they get more and more monies coming in, more and more grants and things like that coming in, they'll probably have to add more people. But the thing is, automated means that we're more efficient, okay? The other thing about it is it can detect and reduce the number of missed costs and expenses and so on, okay? The worst thing that we can do is miss the idea that there's a invoice out there that we never saw in the first place. With an automated system, it triggers you, it flags you, and it tells you, hey, this is here. You need to process this and that sort of thing. Okay. And so basically, it's more efficient so that we can make sure that vendors are taken care of. And we can also monitor the monies a lot better and figure out a better way to make sure that monies going out are going out at the right times. Okay. So this also increases data-driven decisions, making and improving cash flow management. The information is at your fingertips. It's in real time. I had a company I was working with that it was taking them 6 months to get a financial out for a month. So in other words, they were 6 months behind. Board of directors, the executive director couldn't make decisions. Well, I went in and we got it down to 3 months, then we got it down to 1 month. We now, because of the application of an automated system that works very, very well, they now know in real time how much is in the bank account every single day. They know exactly how much outstanding invoices they have every single day. They know their financial statements, everything is in real time. And so it's easier to make any kind of decisions. And let's face it, right now with the pandemic, those decisions have to be made almost immediately. Things change every single day. We can't wait a month to get information anymore. We need it immediately. So this means that how long does it take to close your books each month and year end? The issue about using an automated system is you can get those accruals processed immediately. There's very less chance of a miscalculation, and you can't lose your files very easily. Things don't sit on somebody's desk per se, okay? And as I mentioned earlier, it's simpler for audits. Audit trail is established automatically. You've got your closing of your books done. I have been able to get companies with a good automated system. I've been able to get companies to be able to close their monthly books, quarterly, annual, everything, within less than 10 days. In fact, in many cases, from the first of the month to the 3rd or 4th of the month, depending on whether or not you're dealing with a weekend, okay? I've been able to see companies that have been very much in track, on time, close their books, and at year end, get them done within 10 days and be accurate. And then if they do need to be audited by their CPA firm, that audit goes very, very quickly, saving money. How much does your audit firm charge you to do that external audit for you? It's very expensive. Well, if you can speed up the process, then remember, they're getting paid in many cases by the hour, all right? You can negotiate better terms when it comes to that. Save money again, so more efficient. Another efficiency gains, increase collaboration between employees and departments for more efficiency and effectiveness. If various departments within your organization are experiencing delays due to slow supplier invoice payments, it's inevitable there's going to be friction between those departments and finance. Naturally, friction between your internal departments is not good, and it can cause a lot of problems. In fact, 49% of AP staff already cite that a lack of respect within their organization is one of the biggest challenges, a problem that is likely to be exacerbated if the efficiency of your accounts payable process is causing friction between them and other departments. It's also worth considering that in recent surveys that they have found that vast majorities of staff who actually carry out manual tasks that are part of the inefficient process would like for them to become improved on, and finding that 70% of employees are in favor of automation being introduced for routine tasks such as something as simple as data entry. This desire from staff for more automation and increased respect is not the only factors, but they are factors that eventually cause members of your accounts payable team to leave, development that would cost your organization in terms of hiring and training costs. See, it costs a lot of money to hire a new person, but also through the fact that you would likely suffer from a further decrease in efficiency of your system or your process as new staff members become accustomed to your new processes and systems. Okay, so an inefficient accounts payable process is not something that accounts payable teams likely enjoy being part of. And so we want to make sure that we understand that 63% of employees feel like that inefficient tasks, such as manual data entry, rob them of the opportunity of showing off their best work. Okay, this kind of takes us into one of the things we're going to talk about towards the end as productivity and things like that. So an inefficient accounts payable process doesn't just take up time of one or two members of your accounts payable team. It also has a significant effect on how senior finance staff members spend their time. In other words, believe it or not, it was found by CFO.com that finance function in general spends an incredible 49% of their time processing transactions. This means that in some cases, your most senior finance personnel are spending half their week just processing transactions. Okay, on an average, finance should only be spending about 20% of their time providing the organization with all the financial information that it needs in order to make these strategic decisions. Okay, so the likely reason why your senior staff were initially hired was to be more efficient. So taking these steps to increase your efficiency, you're not only enabling those senior staff members to spend more time utilizing their skills, but you're also providing the whole finance team with the chance to work on tasks that generate real value for your organization, such as preventing fraud, spend management, cash flow management, and all of these other things. So once again, how much do you get paid per minute? Every cent that goes into your system needs to be more efficient and more effective. Okay? So the other thing, we want that swift approval process. We want employees to share data efficiently and all that. We also need to reduce hassles and friction in working with vendors. Work more closely with vendors to expedite payments and cash flow. All right. We need instant access to vendor information. A vendor calls you up on the phone. You need to be able to bring them up immediately to find out what's going on, get to that invoice immediately if there's a question, or if you have a question on payment of an invoice, contacting that vendor right away. Allows instant access to any kind of questionable invoice information. But we want to build a strong relationship with our suppliers. And sometimes this is guaranteed by just ensuring that you're going to pay your invoices correctly and on time. So once again, you're back to the more efficient your system is, okay, the more likelihood you're going to be able to make sure that people get paid in a timely fashion. So with this in mind, it's easy to see that many of your suppliers feel like they need to put in place measures to protect themselves from late payments. So they're already 60% of organizations that have been out there charging late fees. You may be shocked to hear that nearly 1 in 5 organizations have a lot of suppliers who cancel goods or even refuse to work with them because they are slow in their process. We need to speed up our process, be more efficient to prevent costly supplier issues such as these, and offer us the chance to make even further cost savings through the ability to negotiate early payments. All right, so once again, we become, to a certain extent, a revenue generating department. All right, another gain. The accounts payable team is going to be able to attract any invoice, anytime, anywhere. I already mentioned that your month-end closing. How much time is going to be saved and in what ways with our month-end closing? All right, well, okay. Time savings and visibility into approvals. Those approvals will go through so quickly that you'll be able to once again have real time, where are we at? Improved controls with approval documentation. We can show that we are preventing fraud as much as possible and that our numbers, our statistics that we're putting out there, our historical data is correct and it's improved. And so therefore, this analysis that tells us that we're doing things right is going to work. And the stakeholders can make quick decisions, all right? Regular approvals mean that there's not going to be any of those fire drills at the month end trying to hurry up, get things closed out, okay? You'll be able to check on any kind of missing invoices almost immediately because it's at your fingertips. Not to mention your accrual process reporting. A lot of your automated systems have recurring entries that will help with that accrual process. You push one button and all of the recurring entries happen at once. You're going to have 1 to 2 day processing instead of a week or more. So all of this is a gain to the company to be more efficient. But one of the key things that people always are worried about is internal controls and the security of your automated process. Okay, how do we make sure hackers can't get to all of our proprietary information? Okay, let's face it, accounts payable function is far from immune as you move towards the cloud. Cloud computing is the delivery of on-demand computing resources over the internet. Many organizations are now migrating their financial management applications to these cloud-based services, and they're doing it at an increasing rate. A recent survey of senior finance executives found that 36% of organizations will use the cloud to support more than half of their transactional systems, okay, by the end of 2020. Well, we're at the end of 2020. So what's going to happen? Automated cloud-based invoice processing delivers a number of benefits, okay? Postage costs are dramatically reduced, okay? The time spent manually capturing, processing invoices, as we mentioned before, it's a lot quicker. Cloud-hosted systems offer dramatic reductions in the need for on-premise hardware, software, and all associated IT services, such as maintenance, configuration management, update management, deployment. Let's face it, the cloud has changed everything, but it also makes you worry about security, okay? And so what we need to do is make sure that we're looking for this process that basically is as secure as possible. All right, and this is where having a good IT department working with you to make sure everything is right. The other thing is we can, as far as hackers are concerned, we don't want them to get through our cloud, but connect to devices via the internet through a browser or personalized user interface. A lot of companies, what they've done is they've put security in place so there'll be less concern about data breaches. Okay, so connecting those devices through the internet, people can work from home through a browser or whatever, and they've got a firewall that keeps things, security and hackers from getting through to their proprietary information. 72% of finance leaders are either currently using the cloud tech or they plan to before sometime next year. You can stop your scammers with advanced fraud detection systems, okay? There were $6.3 billion in total losses, okay, according to the Association of Certified Fraud Examiner cases, basically over the last year or so. Banking and finance services were the biggest victims. They've lost 16.8%, losing an average of $192,000 annually over the last several years. 2017 Payment and Fraud Control Survey checks continue to be the top vehicle. This is the most thing that is basically where payment fraud happens, by doing physical checks. They're the top vehicle for fraud issues, okay? Second, wire transfers. A lot of companies who do wire transfers, they're the second most targeted payment method, ACH, things like that. With proper approval processes in place, that you'll have less employee theft through fraud activities. I cannot tell you how bad fraud is for employees. I have stories that would just curl your hair when it comes to accounts payable fraud with employees. And I'm not talking about accounts payable employees necessarily. I'm talking about people in purchasing. I'm talking about salespeople. I'm talking about phantom vendor fraud, all of these types of things. I actually had a company where an employee teamed up with a vendor to commit fraud against the company. It cost the company several $1 million. And once again, all of us, no matter who we are, can be subject to all of this. Proper approval processes in place can, I guess you might say, not eliminate, but help us through those, okay? Which leads us to, how do we make sure those internal controls are in place? You're going to have to update your accounts payable policy and procedures manual, especially for your remote workforce. We have to outline step-by-step processes that give guidelines of who does what in the process. Flow charting it out is very helpful. We don't want one person doing 2 steps in a row, okay? The person who, quote unquote, approves the invoice should not be paying the invoice, should not be writing the check for the invoice, should not be doing the bank reconciliation, should not be doing the finance. What we're saying is you need multiple people in different areas to take care of that. Flow chart it out. It's easy to build internal controls against fraud if you know what to look for. Give a basis for explanation to vendors of, well, that's the way we do things, okay? Vendors don't like you to say, well, that's the way we do it, because they're going to say, well, we do it this way. What you need to do is have your policy and procedures manual back you up, saying our policy is we do it this way, and we can't circumvent that for internal control purposes. So we do it in order to protect you and our company both at the same time. Also, a good accounts payable policy and procedures manual will give easy direction to auditors, both internal and external, okay? Auditors like your CPA firm, sales and use tax auditors, other tax auditors, auditors within your company itself, to see if everything is done by the book per se, okay? But most importantly, it assures your stakeholders, the owners of the company, the board of directors, and the partners in the company or whatever, that accounts payable is doing everything you can to protect the bottom line and protect the company's assets. We're right back to what our job description was at the very beginning of all of this. I do recommend a resource for an accounts payable policy and procedures manual. It's a really good one. I've used it for years. I've got the recommended resource at the bottom of the page. Go to www.polyproc.com, and that is where they have a policy and procedures manual, basically already written. You just have to go in and customize it to your particular system, okay? And there's others out there that might be helpful. But the key is, if you flow chart out first your step-by-step process, look for loopholes, close those loopholes, you will be able to put your internal controls in place. Remember, Fraud happens when there is a loophole. Someone finds your loophole, they'll go through it every single time. Okay? Which brings us to, how do we make sure that we can make sure our workforce, our remote workforce, not only is efficient, but that they're performing productively and that sort of thing, okay? Well, basically, what we're saying, most companies today are allowing their employees to work from home. There's many reasons why employees feel more comfortable working from home than working in an office, okay? For some, it's about working without distraction or pressure. Others, it's avoiding traffic. Others are, it allows me to be home where my children are, especially during this pandemic time with schools closed and so on. The list keeps going on and on and on and on. Though working from home seems so simple and easy, there's some new challenges, many challenges. One of such challenges is evaluating performance of these remote employees. And it's very important that you include this in your process of going to an automated system, okay, to be more efficient. Here's your beginner's guide to performance reviews for remote employees. Number one, set objectives. Okay, as a manager, setting the objectives for your remote employees is your primary responsibility. Setting goals and objectives can really be hard. And what you want to do is make sure you know how to set those goals and objectives for your employees. Work with your HR department to figure this out if you're not really sure. And there's all kinds of training out there on how to set goals and objectives. But an employee needs to know exactly what the expectation is, okay? And by setting these objectives out there and what's going to happen step by step and so on, and having the employee know exactly what's expected of them will help you get the kind of performance and productivity you're looking for. But that leads to the second part, open lines of communication. Okay, unlike other employees that you can see on a regular basis, okay, you can walk by their desks, talk to them, see what they're doing. Remote employees don't get to communicate frequently with their managers. A lot of times managers just say, well, here's the job, do it, and walk away. And because we get tied up as managers in other things, we don't really listen sometimes or open those communications between us and the remote employees. You definitely want to make sure that you deal with these open lines of communication. Ask your employees, you know, do they understand what they're supposed to be doing? Do they have questions? Let them know it's okay to call you, to email you, to contact you when they have a problem. And it's like an open door policy. The only thing is that open door is your computer, okay? And your cell phones and that sort of thing. So open those lines of communication so they know that it's okay to come to you and say, hey, you know, I got a problem. I'm not sure what to do about this. How do I handle it, or whatever? The best way to get good productivity is for that open line of communication to be in place. But you also have to plan ahead and organize, okay? You need to be prepared for any kind of challenges that your remote employees are going to face. There are all kinds of webinars out there about the challenges of working from home that employees have to deal with. And one of the biggest ones, of course, is going to be the technical problems. What if the computer goes down? What if there's a storm outside and a transformer goes out and now I don't have access to my computer or I don't have a backup system? Many companies are providing their employees with a backup battery unit to hook to their computers so that if the electricity goes off, they can still work for several hours. They have backup restoration data, things like that, that they have them do on a regular basis, because we can't back up an employee's computer. But if they have their own backup system that they're required to do on a daily basis, there's all kinds of types of remote things that they can do to do this, to do that. Plan ahead, organize, be ready for problems and challenges, and be ready to face them when they happen. And keep in mind, things can change immediately in today's world. Okay. Frequent checks, what they're saying here is check your employees' progress on a regular basis. It's very important. Plan for scheduled visits, personally talk to them. Don't make them feel so remote, all right? I like having Zoom meetings with my people. That way they feel connected. And it's interesting because what'll happen is we'll have a staff meeting once a week or whatever. And maybe once a month, we'll tell everybody they have to dress as if they're going to work, and they have to get up. Ladies have to put their makeup on. Men have to have their hair cut and all that sort of thing, and shaved and all that. And as if they're actually coming to an office, and their computer becomes their office per se. And we have these Zoom meetings and we have fun with it. And there's all kinds of things you can do to interact. And they need to feel connected to the organization, even if they aren't physically present. So basically, you want to have some kind of review software out there that helps you track their performance, and that basically you can use your frequent checks to see how things are going and go through it. Little mini performance checks is a good idea, that sort of thing. Self-evaluation. Now, there's two sides to this one. Encourage them to self-evaluate. Ask them to list the areas that they think they're good at and where they think they might need some improvement, that sort of thing. Ask them to assess the performance of the entire team, so that basically they're giving them an opportunity to know where they stand with the team. Share your opinion about their feedback, but you know what? Sometimes having them do an evaluation of you is helpful too, because that goes back to number 2, it helps us open the lines of communication. The hardest part is number 6, trust. We have to trust our remote employees and exhibit that trust when we talk to them. Most employers feel that remote employees do not dedicate themselves to work completely. I got news for you. Our newest statistics tell us that employees have become a lot more, as much as 60% more productive since they've been working from home. Part of that is the fact that they can work in their time frame in many cases, okay? They don't have all the interruptions, okay? They feel freedom to do their job. They feel that they can contact someone when they have a problem. They trust their supervisor to trust them. They basically know that the company has built-in safeguards for internal controls, so we can trust what's going on. This mindset can help us build a better team spirit by making sure everyone understands that we do trust them. Allow your remote workers to make some decisions on their themselves, as long as it's not something that would hurt the company, okay? The whole idea to this performance evaluation is to evaluate them based on outcome and not on their behavior, okay? So basically, that's what we have to look at in dealing with that one. Okay, so let's kind of wrap all this up together and figure out what our final solutions are to all of this, and kind of talk about what we've talked about up to this point. Why should we choose an automated accounts payable system? All right. Manual invoice entry is labor intensive, and it's not scalable for growth, okay? Inconvenience in printing, signing, mailing, actual checks. Very time consuming to deal with your vendors, maintain supplier data, manage those vendor and supplier calls. The issue is, how much do you get paid per minute? How many minutes it takes to do something? We want to gain efficiency, not lose them. And with an automated system, we probably will gain more efficiency. Make it easier also to establish visibility of what's going on. The visibility is going to be not only for our team itself, but for outside departments, and visibility for our vendors. We're going to be able to pay on time with less hassle, maybe even take some discounts that we were not taking before. It's going to reduce the payment friction and make our job easier in the long run in dealing with vendors, suppliers, salesperson, purchasers, and so on. So there's a lot that it does for us to go to an automated system. But we also have to increase productivity. And increasing productivity doesn't have to mean more hires as work volume increases. So the cost factor is going to be more efficient in the long run, okay? We will have increased productivity with a good automated system. It's going to help us with the new normal. We have to adopt new ways of doing business, okay? There's a lot of technology out there. We need to leverage the support that it provides and strengthen relationships to make it work for us, okay? But all of this can only come together if we can require good performance management by managers of the remote workforce. Keep in mind what we said at the very beginning. Protect the bottom line, protect the company's assets. With a remote workforce, this performance management by managers is so important. Training is extremely important to make sure that managers know how to get more from their remote workforce so that they can be more efficient. Companies can efficiently manage more work. They can protect their bottom lines, all with the same sales staff, or all with the same staff and team that they have today. Okay? All right, Ty, I'm going to turn this back over to you at this point.
Thank you, Pamela. A lot of great information there. And in order to remain on schedule, we'll respond to the questions that came in via email in a timely manner. So with that, on behalf of CFO Daily News, I'd like to thank everyone for attending the webinar. This concludes our program.